go ahead and read the question.
Okay, so Jameson is asking, how did you approach math once you went back to it in 10th grade? Actually, it was 11th grade. You took your geometry first, I think.
Yeah.
Could you give an example of your day when you were about 12? So that's really two questions.
Let's
So,
talk about the math first. Well, my mom was just saying how I would do all kinds of math-related activities, and it would be kind of sneaking math in. I hated math, still hate math, would do anything to avoid it. But man, I love cooking. So we could learn all kinds of fractions, and we can learn how to double fractions and how to half fractions by doing cooking. And if it's a necessary step, I'll figure it out. I think when I didn't really learn my times tables until I got a job and I wanted to figure out how much money I was making. So I would sit there up on the lifeguard stand with nothing else to do, and I would calculate in my head how much money am I making today. And that's when I really started learning, like, oh, okay, well, I make $8 an hour, so 7 hours, that must be $56 for the whole day, and then how much is coming out in taxes or whatever. Well, okay, so when I was homeschooling, I hated math, and we didn't do any math. We decided just to cut it out.
Yeah, if you remember, you came back in 7th grade because that was a switch in schools, and there was a lot less support at that school than you had in the prior school. So you were begging you kept saying, if I could just have my books in front of me and not be changing classes, I could focus on my work. And so that made sense, and math was a real struggle at that point. So we gave you a choice. We said either we get a tutor or we test you and you work at your actual level that you're at. And that's what you chose, and you tested at 5th grade, beginning 5th grade and 7th grade. So that was the first year you walked through math and you got A's and B's consistently. It was like where you were at. So
yeah, this whole thing about like grade level it's a myth. The grade level is made up. The analogy I'm going to use is if you take your kid to horseback riding for the first time when they're 15, you don't say, well, what's average horseback riding level for a 15-year-old? You say, we're beginners. We're starting at level 1.
Right.
It doesn't matter how old you are. That's where you're at. But for some reason, the reason that we've come up with these grade levels is because it's convenient for teachers, and that's the only reason. You should start your kid where they're at, and don't expect them to be conforming to this grade level myth. If your kid's 10 or 2 years ahead in math, that's awesome. If they're 2 years behind in math, that's just what level they're at. They're going to make a lot more progress if you're working with them at their level than trying to have them do something that's way over their head or really boring for them.
And they'll get there.
Yeah, they're going to get there.
17 or 18, they'll arrive. So how many years did we force feed you flashcards and you still didn't know your times tables when you were 12?
Right.
What a waste of your day and our day. Year after year after year, trying to keep you up to grade level. And every year we heard, you will not succeed in high school and in college if you don't master each step along the way.
That's a terrible thing to say.
Yeah, and it was really it was force feeding you, and it was so unnecessary. But it is necessary if you're going to be in a classroom. You have to stay with the class. All right.
Well, once I jumped back into the classroom, it was just I want to be where the other friends are. So I don't want to be behind them.
Yeah.
So
there's some good peer pressure too.
Yeah, there's some good peer pressure. So I didn't get the greatest grade in math, but I passed it. And I accomplished it. The other thing is, I'm such a visual learner. Geometry was so much easier for me. And for some reason, schools think that you have to do algebra first to do geometry. That's a terrible idea. If you're a visual thinker, do geometry first, because there's a reason behind all these numbers and letters. I hate finding what x equals. I don't care what x equals. But if it's something like, oh, you can measure the height of this building using its shadow, okay, that's kind of cool. I want to be able to do that. So I'm going to figure out what I need to figure out with the math. But there's an end goal and there's a result, and I can see it. So that makes it so much easier for me and more interesting to me.